Hello everybody, it is Wednesday and I do not remember what day. I think it's the 21st. And we're doing chapters 3 and 4 again today because I accidentally did this live from my personal channel. Still not sure how I did that. And not from here, and so we weren't able to even download it from there. It wouldn't let us to the YouTube channel. So interestingly, we got a big crowd, but I don't think it was at all the same crowd that's usually over here. So take two. Well, hello Grace, who's setting up hi Grace, who's setting up the party over there so everybody can watch. Chapters 3 and 4. Didn't want anyone to miss out. This was the only way we could fix it, is if I just read it again. So you know this is all unrehearsed and live because one day I forgot to turn on the lights and it looked like I was reading from witness protection, and yesterday I read from the wrong channel. Oh well. And occasionally you get to hear from Lois, who's behind me, of course. Lois was born deaf, and deaf dogs are often called Velcro dogs because they don't leave your side. So if I move, she moves. Unless she's running back and forth to bark at someone. That takes precedent. Leela is outside listening for anyone who's mowing their lawn because she loves to run up and down the fence with noise. Welcome to Sheltering in Place. Anyway, we're reading from WarMage Unexpected, Book 1. Book 3, I think, Grace can correct me, comes out on the 26th. And the new Gothdrow is out, so there's lots to read. Lyris starts again June 29th. Been hard at work on that. I hope everyone is doing well. I think we're in week 6 of Sheltering in Place, but kind of lost track of that too. Maybe it's a good thing. I'm not staring at it wondering when it ends. So let's get started. Maybe I'll give a better reading today with practice. Okay, and hi Diane and hi Nancy. Sorry about yesterday and you were wondering where I was. Hello Michael. And so here we go. WarMage Book 1, Chapter 3. Raven was up early the next day, excited to get to her chores and head back to school. The sun was just rising over the horizon, casting a soft light across the ranch when she headed out to feed the goats. She didn't see the crossbow in time before the tip of the arrow pierced her shoulder and lodged itself into the bone. Urgh! She gritted her teeth, clenching her stomach to trap the scream that wanted to escape. She slowly exhaled through her nose and glanced at the small ranch house behind her. Nothing stirring inside, yet. She looked down at the arrow sticking out. No time to get this out now. Raven lifted her eyes and saw the skinny, gangly, short elf snatching up one of the dwarf goats into its bony arms. The elf's little bald head glistened in the rising sunlight. Her right arm pressed to her side, Raven pushed off the ground with her left arm and up to her feet. She lifted the board with her left hand, leaning against her shoulder. When he wakes up, the first thing he'll say is, "Why didn't you grab the sword?" She charged after the elf again, who set the goat down long enough to fire another arrow, quickly gathering the bleeding animal back up again. The arrow streaked toward Raven's head. She hoisted the board in front of her, putting it between her face and the arrow, which embedded itself into the wood. Without breaking her stride, she dropped the board and lunged after the elf, wrapping her arms around his shoulder and tackling him to the ground. He was much older than the teenager, but his spindly legs couldn't outrun her. He dropped the goat, who bleated upon impact. Raven grabbed the animal by the scruff of its neck and pulled it back, hoping to create enough distance between the kid and its pursuer. She barely had let go of the little goat when the elf drove both feet into her jaw, snapping her head back. She fell in a heap, dazed. Whoa. He let out a squeal of delight as the ruby stone inset in silver pinned to her jacket. He leaped into the air, his bony fingers open wide, drool sliding down the side of his mouth. "Think again, shorty." Raven swung hard, her fists making contact with his midsection and throwing him off center. She felt the rumbling of magic passing through her, rising with her emotions. It always did. He leapt to the side, doubled over, growling angrily. "Foul child," he snarled, still managing a sly smile. What spell? What spell? Raven blinked a few times to refocus her vision, just in time to see the elf snatch up the goat and take off again. She pulled herself to her feet and picked up the board, snapping off the arrow at its shaft and leaving the head sticking out. She bumped her legs as fast as possible, trying to ignore her throbbing jaw. All I need is to get one good shot on him and he'll be toast. The board was oak, heavy and nearly 3 feet long, 18 inches wide, just big enough to do some damage. In fact, Raven used the same board to fight off 2 beastmen the previous week. Elves have skulls like eggshells. If this thing can beat away a couple of beastmen at once, an elf will be no problem. He's half their size, easy pickings. The searing pain of the arrow burned down her arm while her warm blood leaked from the wound and soaked into her sleeve. Ahead, the elf hustled his little feet across the ranch. The dwarf goat bouncing along under his arm. Her breath heaving rapidly, Raven gripped the board in her good hand and turned on the afterburners, rearing back and preparing to swing with all her might. Geez, this guy is fast for such a scrawny little thing. Raven was no stranger to old elves. Once a child reached a certain age in Brighton, you were warned about elves and their sticky fingers. Half of Raven's job was to keep the dwarf goats safely in their pen every day. Letting one slip by into an elf's hands was a terrible start to the morning, and she wasn't going to settle for it. Once she reached within swinging distance, she took her best shot, but missed the elf's wrinkled little head. He was a smaller target than the beastmen were, half as big but twice as fast. The momentum of the swing pulled Raven down, slamming her face first into the dirt. Her feet flipped up into the air, then her whole body fell. The sound of the elf's semi-quiet cackling sickened her. I'm not going down this easy, you jackass. The fall at least yanked the arrow out from her shoulder. The blood gushed more. I'll deal with that later. I've got time. The elf stopped running away, instead turning to face her again. The click of the crossbow. He was preparing another shot. Death didn't scare Raven. It never did. She wasn't sure why. Even in that moment, staring down what could have been her demise, she didn't spend a second thinking about what would happen if the elf was a decent shot. But she didn't have to worry. He ripped off an arrow that whistled past her ears. She fell to the ground instinctively, frantically feeling around for the board in the dim morning light. But she couldn't find it. What is that spell? The elf began loading up another shot in his crossbow. The goat squeezed between his legs. Then he saw Raven rise to her feet and extend her arm. His stomach sank and he slung the crossbow over his shoulder, grasping the goat in his arms. He took off running, clutching the dwarf goat under his arm. Now I remember. You should have put it down, asshole. With a devilish smile on her dirt-covered face, Raven whispered, Offendiculum repente. With a grunt, the elf stumbled and fell, his feet kicking out from under him. The goat rolled off to the side and the elf pushed up, lifting his face from the dirt. The elf's once confident face fell, his eyes wide in panic. He reached for the goat, but Raven pointed to it. Quod hic adicere, one of her favorite spells. Before the elf could wrap his arms around the goat, the animal floated off the ground and up out of reach. The elf slammed his palm into the dirt in frustration. Amused, Raven watched as the goat gently soared through the air, its legs extended straight down as if it were standing on a little platform. It flew to her and landed safely at her side. She made eye contact with the elf, who scampered off, his footsteps echoing across the flat land of the ranch. Squinting her eyes, Raven focused on his arm. Just in case you think about coming back here. E disrumpum. He squealed as his arm whipped behind his back, the bone cracking loudly. Raven shook her head. That was satisfying. The elf nearly clipped his own shoulder on one of the tall wooden poles holding up the Albie Goat Ranch sign over the path leading to the house before he spun around it and disappeared down the road. As her adrenaline settled down, Raven picked up the goat and cradled it with her good arm, wincing in pain from the gaping wound in her shoulder. She was lightheaded, her heart beating fast, and she took a few deep breaths to calm herself down. 3 spells that quickly was a risk. It could take a few minutes before a healing spell would finally work, or work enough. The goat looked up at her and licked her face. You know, if you guys could try fighting back once in a while, that would really help me out. Where's that board? You'll be stuck inside all day if I don't put it back. She saw the board lying in the grass and put down the small goat. Follow me. I need to close up this hole in my shoulder before... Raven! She recognized the tone in her grandfather's gruff, deep voice. Worried as usual, too late for trying out one more spell to hide this wound. She dragged the board behind her while the goat trotted along at her side. She approached the pen where the other goats were stumbling around, waking up, and trying to figure out where their missing brother was. She dropped the board and lifted the once kidnappee back into the safety of his friends and family. Hang on, Grandpa, I gotta put this board back. She watched as her grandfather crossed his arms when she passed. It's okay, don't look concerned for bleeding granddaughter or anything. Raven sucked in her bottom lip, doing her best to ignore the pain as she propped open the door on the inside of the shed. It allowed for the free-flowing traffic of the bouncing, dancing goats, inside and out. She stopped and leaned up against the open door for a moment, turning her head to look at the broad sky and the fast-moving clouds and take in a deep breath. She shuffled her feet, kicking up dirt while she approached her grandfather. He was standing on the back step of the house, scowling. Good morning to you, too. She held her jaw with her good hand, wiggling it back and forth to make sure it was still in place. Are you okay? Most of me. I just have to clean this out and bandage it up. I think the jaw's fine, just bruised up. Shame you couldn't have hung on to any healing powers, Grandpa. Yeah, well, he cleared his throat. What were you doing out there? She looked at him, her forehead wrinkled. Seriously? Saving a goat. I know how much these things are worth. The market's paying good money for milk these days. It's a good time to be a rancher. That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it. Raven hesitated, looking off in the distance where the elf had run off, then back at him. Look, can I just get inside and clean up? He raised his eyebrows and repeated himself. What were you doing out there? You were slow to get out that first spell. Grandpa, you rung my bell pretty well. It took a minute for my head to clear. Did you see that punch I got off? That fight training all summer paid off. I could have taken an arrow to my eye. Do you know why he was firing arrows at you? Do you know why he even tried to steal one from us? Raven held her right arm under her elbow, trying to keep it from moving. The pain radiated outward all the way to her fingertips. Because of the sign? There was small print at the bottom of the sign, an SW, indicating that the home belonged to a spent wizard. A wizard who had used all of his magical energy in the great battle till there was none left. A magical emeritus. It was meant to be a sign of respect from the town leaders for services rendered so many years ago, but not everyone took it like that. Grandpa was not satisfied with her answer. Sweetheart, if that were the case, then we'd have elves crawling all over this place swiping my goats. Actually, we wouldn't have any left by now, and I'd probably be dead. It's not a secret. No, it's because he saw you go out without anything to defend yourself besides magic. I never, ever go out to check on the goats without at least a sword on my hip. He tilted his head down and leveled his gaze at her. I can still take care of myself, he said evenly. I know enough to take him down without needing to use a sword, Grandpa. It was just going to be a quick morning check, and I thought I had the spells if I needed them. You needed them, and they were almost out of reach. That's the problem. Things happen. Learning spells is easy, but figuring out how to balance the magic and weapons so it's all there when you need it takes time and wisdom. That's why I've been teaching you both. He lowered his chin to look at her, his forehead wrinkled. I know your magic is different, he let out a sigh. It comes more easily to you and stays a lot longer. Has it ever run out? Raven gave a slow shrug. I haven't pushed it to the limits yet. He smiled at his granddaughter. That's what I'm afraid of, Raven. That you'll find the wall when you need the magic the most. Enough for one day. Come on, let's clean you up. He hugged her gently and let go. You look so much like her, like your mother. More every day. He shook his head and walked back into the house, holding the screen door open for her, letting it slam behind them. Your mother was a powerful mage, too. Have I ever told you this story? Raven cut him off with a quick smile. I love you, Grandpa. Clever girl. Chapter 4. Hello, Peter. Hi, Sheila. So, for those of you who missed what I said earlier, I accidentally read chapters 3 and 4 yesterday on the wrong channel. So, and we couldn't download it for YouTube either. So, today is take 2 reading chapters 3 and 4. Hi, Tracy. Glad y'all are here. And hello, Heather. And so, didn't want anybody to miss any chapters of a great book, because then you'd wonder what was going on. So today, chapter 3 and 4, and tomorrow we meet Leander the dragon. So chapter 4. Raven made her way into the house, past the small sitting room, and into the closet in the hallway next to the bathroom. She pulled out a small wooden box and carried it into the bathroom, setting it on the counter next to the sink. She gritted her teeth, sucking in air, and said, "Soname," with as much conviction as she could muster. A buzz passed through her shoulder, and the blood dried around the edges, closing slightly, but that was as far as it went. The spell, she knew, wasn't strong enough, but it had helped. Raven let out a sigh. Rock is rolling in the right direction, I suppose. Guess we're going old school for the rest of it. She unclasped the box and flipped the lid open, revealing a variety of bandages, gauze pads, and tape. Next to them all was a large brown bottle with a metal cap. Raven winced as the rough canvas of her cream-colored overshirt rubbed against the wound from the arrow. She gingerly put the bottle down on the counter and tugged at her shirt, trying to pull it over her head with one arm. Her grandfather made his way down the hallway, leaning against the doorway of the bathroom with his hands in his pockets. "Want a little help?" "Am I allowed to have help, or am I learning another lesson?" She gave him side-eye, annoyed. He chuckled and gently helped her take off her jacket. He grabbed the shoulders of the long overshirt, yanking it up over her head. "Let's not be dramatic or anything. Ooh, that's a doozy. The arrow nipped the bone." Blood still dripped down her arm, a little more every time she moved. "You already tried the spell?" he asked. Raven sighed, frustrated, and nodded her head. "Needed to close it up so I can get back to work." She wrapped her hand around the neck of the brown bottle and tried to flip it open the cap with her thumb, but she couldn't do it one-handed. Her thumb flicked hard against the lever. Ow. That spell was meant for a deep cut or a wounded hand. This is a little more than that. Her grandfather reached over and took the bottle out of her hands. "Just let me do it. Sit down." She dragged a stool from the corner of the bathroom over and sat down on it in front of him. "This is a two-handed job. Blue wart cream has to get all the way down to the bottom of the wound if it's going to do anything." With two hands, he flipped open the lever. Whew! The noxious fumes of the liquid inside hit his nose. "I hate using this stuff." He closed it back up for a moment, his eyes watering. Raven shook her head. "I bet. At least you only have to smell it." "My dear, I have had gallons of this stuff poured over me through the years. I'm pretty sure my blood is equal parts blue wart, coffee, and whiskey. You know, I got this recipe from one of the spent wizards." Raven looked up, her mouth open, but she was keeping very still. It was so rare for him to ever talk about his old friends or what happened so long ago, and it always came in bits and pieces that never really connected. "I don't think I would have survived the years of the Great War without this crap. Hell, this stuff was all that was holding Large Crag together. He was like a tall poppy, as tall as he was wide, strong as a team of horses and just as determined. Hold still." Raven was holding her breath, marveling at the start of an actual story, but his voice wound down and he stopped. "Were you wounded badly during the Great War?" she said, sitting on the edge of the stool. Her grandfather narrowed his eyes and looked at her, holding the salve in midair. "I've spent years trying to forget what I saw. It's how I can remain here in the present with you and be happy. But..." A distant look passed across his face. It was one she had seen many times before. "Let it go. For me." He flipped the top again. "Oh, damn, this does smell bad." His head rocked back and they both laughed. Raven closed her eyes in preparation for the amber liquid to hit her skin. Her grandfather lightly pinched the skin, squeezing out a little more blood, then spread the gash open a little more. "Bombs away." He splashed some of the liquid onto Raven's skin. It hissed and bubbled as it seeped into her body. She grit her teeth and clenched her muscles to keep herself from screaming. The searing pain burned its way down to the bone as Raven held her breath, waiting for it to pass. "Just another couple of seconds, and then I'll close you up." She could feel the blood rushing to her face as she held her breath, finally releasing it and gasping again. "Damn, I hate that." Connor Albee laughed. "I don't know anyone who likes it." The look came over his face again, but it gets the job done. "I love you, Grandpa," she said quietly. Raven stood up from the stool and rifled through the box. "Okay, you know what else would get the job done? A good healing spell." "You know I can't do those anymore, granddaughter." He looked away, not making eye contact for a moment, but Raven didn't notice. A wave of pain and nausea had washed over her, and she had briefly closed her eyes. She looked at him in the mirror with a cocked eyebrow. "Okay, teach me another healing spell. A better one, and I can do this all by myself." He lifted his foot and rested it on the stool. "You're going to learn this again at the academy, but it never hurts to hear it twice. Healing spells are very draining for most mages and should only be used in emergencies. Using one could leave you without magic for a day. They are some of the most powerful spells we have. You're probably not even going to learn about them until next year sometime. I can handle powerful spells, Grandpa. I've done them already. Raven grabbed a roll of tape from the bottom of the box along with some gauze padding. You've done 1 or 2 and under my supervision. School will teach you how to handle them. I'm not sure I did a very good job of getting that lesson across to you. He pulled the bandages from her hands and moved his foot off the stool, sitting her back down again. She shook her head. You're doing the Kingdom of Service. I have such a head start on the rest of the class. Don't get cocky. It's not cockiness. I pulled an advanced spell yesterday on my first day, a simple one that took some finesse. Her grandfather smiled at her and wearily rubbed his face. Headmaster Flynn caught me and told me he was impressed. As far as I'm concerned, you should be teaching me more. Connor peeled away a few pieces of gauze padding and held them to her wound. Hold this here for a second. He picked at the edge of the tape and unrolled a long piece. You don't know everything, sweetheart. You're a good fighter. I'll give you that. And living out here on a ranch, that's a necessity. As for learning how to become a powerful mage, you're going to have to give it time. There's a big difference between learning a few powerful spells for emergencies and a proper, well-rounded training and education. That's what you're going to get at Fowler. He applied the tape to the gauze, binding it tightly to her skin. There. Give it a day or 2. We'll change it out a few times to keep it clean. It'll heal up just fine. It's a good, clean gash. Now let me look at your jaw. Raven spun around on the stool so their grandfather could kneel down and face her at eye level. If I'm moving so much faster than everyone else, why should I have the same education? There ought to be a faster track for those who know what they're doing, you know? He put his thumb on her chin and guided her head left and right as he inspected the purple bruising underneath. You don't know everything. And when you act like that, you can become more vulnerable, not less. Look what happened to you out there this morning. You thought you knew what you were doing, you got turned around, and you paid for it. I saved the goat. You did. Sometimes half measures work, but they usually have a higher price. Connor Albee winced, and Raven wondered if the old memories of a long-ago battle still haunted him. He poked at the left side of her chin. I think you're okay. You're right, it's just a bit of deep bruising. Gonna hurt like hell tomorrow morning. She frowned. I'm sorry I went out there without something to protect myself. You're right. She grasped her grandfather's hand for a moment, squeezing it and letting go. I just know I'm going to do some great things. I can already wield spells better than anyone I know. He smiled at her, watching her grow more animated. Her one good hand was chopping through the air. Once I get through the academy, I'll be out there accomplishing things instead of... She trailed off, realizing what she was about to say. Connor stood up and wiped his hands off with a towel, smirking at her. Instead of being a lowly goat rancher, the sides of his mouth turned up ever so slightly. That's not what I meant. Sure it is. You've got powers, so you want to use them. I was just as headstrong as you were back in the day. Raven saw her chance. Tell me about the death swarm. What happened in the last battle? She stood up and kicked the stool into the corner of the bathroom, and they both walked out to the sitting room at the front of the house. Connor paused, searching his granddaughter's face. You're getting older, and they'll teach you about it in school anyway. He sat down on a leather chair, resting his elbows on his knees. When I heard about the swarm the first time, I couldn't believe it either. But as a young warrior who just wanted to get out into the fields, past the wall, and kick some ass, the prospect of him got my blood roiling. He clenched his fist and shook it. Raven sat down carefully on the floor at his feet and rested her hand on his knee. When you're at war with another kingdom, there are consequences you often have to deal with, he said. The morality of war gets a little dicey at times because you're thinking about how the guys on the other side have families and lives of their own. Not the swarm, though. Raven leaned back, looking out the window and watching the ranch hands across the field processing the grass for the little goats. The swarm were soulless. Connor spit out the word, scowling. No rules, no consciences, no families to worry about. They used to roam the lands out there. The only thing they wanted was food, and they'd get it by any means necessary. And we're the food, said Raven with a shudder. When the sun went down, they were on the hunt. Anybody with half a brain stayed away from the land out there. She looked back toward the window at the peaceful landscape. 2 ranchers were carrying buckets of milk from the goat barn to the shed on the west side of the land. The swarm didn't scare me. I was ready to go. I knew my spells. I knew that they needed a good ass kicking. It was the perfect match for an ambitious young man with a lot of power under his belt. Remember, we are Albies, from a long line of wizards. But great power sometimes has consequences you just can't see ahead of time. He tilted his head, noticing that his granddaughter was looking out the window. Without saying a word, he disappeared to his bedroom. Raven turned and watched him go without saying a word. She knew he had reached his limits, and it had been a long day already. But Connor marched back into the room, sat down in a chair, and placed a large white skull on the table. Look. Raven came over from the window and looked closely at it. It was a stark, white, rounded skull. The large lower jaw jutted out, exposing 2 rows of sharp, menacing teeth. What is this? It's a swarm skull, my dear. One of my first kills. It's from a terror we nicknamed Razorbacks. Those were the ones that looked like beetles with a growth problem and spikes all over their shells. Her eyes widened as she walked partway around the table. Can I touch it? He pushed it closer to her. Go ahead. She picked it up and lifted it to eye level, staring at what would have been the face of the creature. Where are the eye holes on this thing? Connor shook his head. They don't have eyes. Only the skifflings. But most of them run around with no eyes to direct them. Raven furrowed her brow. They don't. Then how do they know where to go? That is too creepy. Most of the creatures in the swarm have 3 main senses: smell, hearing, and general mayhem. They hunt down their food by smelling their prey. And they only exist to consume, and that's what makes them so dangerous. She spun around the skull to look at the back of it, peering into the hole where the creature's backbone would have connected. They're hungry all the time? What's so dangerous about that? He chuckled, shaking his head. These monsters have no allegiance to anyone. So if, say, a rival kingdom wants to attack somebody, they could have negotiated with a skiffling and send the swarm in with the promise of a living, breathing food resource. They never attacked a large group, but they were relentless. They came at you until they either injured badly enough, or until they're either injured badly enough, or until they run out of something to hunt. They were like weapons? Very powerful weapons, yes, and the sight of one of them was enough to freeze your blood. He raised his eyebrows, taking the skull from her. I took this one's head off myself, Raven. I was out there, battling side by side with other powerful wizards like myself. We managed to just barely beat them into retreating, at least in that fight. They came back later, but a few of us were able to take down 2 of the monsters. We picked apart the bones ourselves just to get a good look at them. So many rumors ran through the kingdom, but there's one that in my experience rings true. What's that? If you can see the swarm, you're probably too late. I don't know, Grandpa. I've heard a lot of rumors about these things, but you're a sacrifice. They don't exist anymore. Raven pointed out the window at the wall towering in the distance. Do you think they're back? What? No. But the rumors about the empty satellite ranches. People have been making up stories for years about their return. They've become our bogeyman. No, they're dead and gone. Thank God. Then something else is going wrong, Grandpa. Something else is out there beyond the wall. We should gather a squad and go beyond the wall to gather information, like the old days. An adventure will find you, Raven. Don't be in such a hurry. He lifted his ankle and rested it on his knee. I've been on the front lines. Information doesn't always come, and it's never cheap. It takes a lot more firepower than just waltzing out there and throwing a few spells at the enemy. The kingdom needs protecting, and we are Albies. Isn't it our responsibility? He slowly leaned back in the chair. Nothing in this world is so straightforward, Raven. I'm a rancher now and a grandfather, and my responsibility is to help you become the powerful mage you're destined to be. Raven took the skull from him and looked down at it, pressing her lips together. What if a mage isn't exactly all I want to be? She pushed the thought away for another time. That is 3 and 4, and in the right channel. I hope you all enjoyed it. Tomorrow will be 5 and 6, and we will finally meet the dragon. Hi Trisha. I hope everyone has a good day. This one will actually get posted in the YouTube channel later today if you missed it, so you can keep up with us. We're doing WarMage Unexpected Book 1. Book 3 comes out on the 26th. Grace, if I said that wrong, please correct me. And Goth Drow's already out now. There's a new Lone Valkyrie coming out shortly. And there's plenty of box sets to read, many of them at 99 cents. And more Lyra Chronicles will be coming your way June 29th. So I hope you all have a good day. I think I'm going to take a long walk somewhere in this day. And I will see you back here tomorrow at 1 on the correct channel with the lights on with no coughing. That's my goal. I will talk to you all later, and I love you all, and keep writing and sending me pictures. I answer everyone, and I'll talk to you later.